Let's talk about what's up with Duke first.
Okay.
Before we get into the end of game situation that saw, was it Michael Collins of Virginia Tech go up 77-75 on the Blue Devils with about 14 seconds left in the game, and in his excitement, without realizing Cal Filipowski was behind him, hit him in the throat, and it caused the whole scene. We'll get to that in a second because there's a lot of layers to that, I think. Duke's got a scoring problem, and this was even before Dariq Whitehead's leg injury. That is unfortunate. They go through some serious scoring droughts in the course of a game. However, I still think that Duke is, in terms of identity, defensively good enough to muck up games, keep it competitive, and then let one of their star guys, or a guy who they can consistently fill it up, in this case it's been Kyle Filipowski, to get him back in the game. That's exactly what happened yesterday against Virginia Tech. I think it looked like Virginia Tech was going to run out of the building against Duke last night. I think there was like a 20-8 run at 1.2, and Duke claws its way back because defensively they're good enough to get the other team back down to their level. Is this what we expect out of Duke? No, not based on what we've seen the last couple of years, but we have to allow for Jon Scheyer's first season with the Blue Devils and how not all five-star recruits are the same. This is kind of who they are, man. And this is a team that I can see mucking their way to an ACC tournament final. I can see this. I absolutely can see this. They're ugly enough and defensively good enough that I can see them just making things ugly and winning a couple games. That happened last night, but I can see it. You disagree.
Yeah, it's not there. And Duke has, I'm looking at it right in front of me, 247 Sports composite rankings. Number 2, Dariq Whitehead. Number 3, Derek Lively. Number 4, Kyle Filipowski. Filipowski's held up his end of the bargain.
Mm-hmm.
The other two players, for whatever reason, whether it's injury, whether it's fit, whether it's...
Whitehead's easy to understand. That's injury. I mean, he starts the season with a leg injury, and then last night he's hurt.
Could be.
No, with Whitehead, I do think it's injury.
You know how I feel. It feels like the mixtape.
You judge Duke on a harsher level than any other team.
No. That's not true. That's not true.
Okay.
It feels like the mixtape to me.
Yeah.
Talent is like the mixtape to me.
Fair.
Right? Yesterday you played Oye Como Va for me, and I still probably said it wrong, but I heard the
you knew it.
I got it. You're like, you're not going to get the orange carpet, and I'm like, no, I got this, right? But you have to hit it.
Mm-hmm.
You have to hit it. Talent is like that.
Yeah.
And I'm sure somebody's screaming out there, no, it's not fair, but it's the truth.
Mm-hmm.
In my opinion, it's the truth. When you know it, when you see it. And
there's something else that's a lot like that
sure,
was in Congress.
But Jason Tatum, right? We would see him. You're like, oh, that thing pops.
Yeah.
Right? Even a Kobe White, you see that. You're like, man, there's something different there.
Mm-hmm.
There's a different gear there. There's a different speed there. I don't see that with this Duke team. That doesn't mean it's not a good team.
Right.
Duke is an NCAA tournament team. That's what they are. Okay?
Whatever you are saying right now, how is that any different than what I'm just laying out for Duke?
Because Duke has a different standard.
I'm not talking about the standard. I'm talking about what Jon Scheyer is in his first season in the same way we talked about Hubert Davis in the first season last year. I get what the standard is.
Sure.
But just because that's the standard, we have to allow for things to change, okay, and how we view these things over time. Simple as that, man. Simple as that. This is not a Hall of Fame coach coaching Duke right now.
I'm not even sure a Hall of Fame coach is going to change those three players, though, is what I'm getting at.
I'm not focused on the players. And we've seen Duke teams win championships without that superstar talent. I mean, we can go back to 2010. Sure. Jon Scheyer. Of all the people who understands how to win different ways, Jon Scheyer would be one of them.
Brian Zubek.
Because of how that played out, right? And that's what I see with Duke, ultimately. I mean, again, maybe you and I are judging Duke a little bit differently. I get where you're going with
the 2010
whole
also
thing.
had older players. These are not old enough players.
Things are relative.
The injuries have
sure.
Kind of deprived them of the ability to come together.
But college basketball is not where it was in 2010. That's the other thing too. You could have an older team back in 2010 more often than not. That's not necessarily the case now. And you have to judge this Duke team.
You're saying this Duke team is good enough to go to Greensboro and win the ACC tournament. That's what you just said,
I said
right?
To get to the final.
Well, I mean, if they get to the final, who's going to be in their way then?
Could be Virginia Tech again.
Could be.
Like last year or like last night. That's all I'm saying. So, I don't want to be... What I found interesting about you with Duke is that you're automatically dismissive with Duke if they don't have the dudes.
Mm-hmm.
Given the fact that I know that Duke can win without the dudes.
Yeah, when's the last time they legitimately had to win without dudes?
I just told you.
No, Kyle Singler, Nolan Smith,
I just told
John
you.
Shire were good college players at a time when guys were going pro early, so that was a nice little window that they caught. Never forget, they didn't play Boogie and Wall. So, that's how the cookie crumbles in the tournament. Everyone wants to tell me what a great coach Tony Bennett is.
Sure.
He had the easiest path in the history of basketball to the 2019 title. So,
Well, that's why when we get into a larger conversation about the ACC, everybody brings up the fact that the ACC is not so hot right now. This is another year where they're not so hot. And I'm thinking to myself, somebody put out the stat earlier today. In the last 10 years, if you look at Ken Pom or free Ken Pom, Bart Torvik, the ACC has never been considered the best conference in college basketball, yet they're the conference with the most wins in the NCAA tournament because of the randomness of the NCAA tournament.
probably the coaches too.
That has something to do with it. Kyle Filipowski last night gets hit in the throat in the final seconds of that game. Here's John Shire, head coach of the Blue Devils, on Filipowski coming back after that punch to the throat.
I can tell you in that play, he got hit so hard that he was throwing up in the huddle. Like he was, full out throwing up, and he wasn't about to be out for a second. Like he was ready to come back in, and we ended up drawing up the play and put the ball in his hands, and we missed the shot. But that's what happened right before, and he's a big time warrior, man. He's a competitor. He hates to lose. Thought you could see that tonight. He really put us on his back and willed us to put us in position to win that game.
So that's Shire after the game. He's right. They were in a position to win that game because of Kyle Filipowski. But again, with 14 seconds left, Michael Collins hits a jumper. They go up 77-75. And in the excitement of it all, he fist pumps and he turns his body and he hits Filipowski in the throat. There was no foul on the play. That's the part that I found the most surprising. Okay, there was no foul on the play. Once you go to the monitor, we start getting into it was incidental contact. He wasn't actually meaning anything by it. They weren't going to elevate it to some sort of flagrant 1 or flagrant 2 or whatever. But I did find it interesting that in the moment a guy gets hit in the throat and not a whistle was blown. That's the only part that I thought was illuminating, and that you can go.
You could see that though. It's in transition from after a made basket. You could see why the officials would have missed that. Yes.
Do I have to ask the question?
Do I think if Mike Krzyzewski was the coach of Duke and the same exact review happened that there would be no free throws awarded? I could sell you the ferry to Chapel Hill to the Outer Banks if you'd like. Okay. If you believe that.
Got it. Okay.
Because you already know.
Okay, then. Okay.
You already know.
I got some pushback from.
It's not a bad thing.
It's not a bad thing.
Again, this is just human nature.
Yes. I got some pushback from Duke fans over the weekend because there was a couple of instances in the Miami game that I went, ooh, no call in that situation? I know if Mike Krzyzewski was the head coach, they probably, and it gets the home court advantage, right? Sure. I guess it's the classic case of, if I go full Colin Cowherd on you, it reminds me a lot of people who talk about like how they made their bones in life. It's like every story in the New York Times about how you got this up and coming person who just started this business out of nothing, and then like 5 paragraphs deep in this New York Times feature on this person, you come to find out that their parents gave them $100,000 in loans, right? I built this from the ground up, no help. My hands, I did this. Oh yeah, by the way, I just happened to be the recipient of a gem mine. No big deal. Just gonna bury that little detail right there. There was a recent kerfuffle over nepotism, nepo babies. Did you read any of that stuff? And all these people were like, well, all these people are sons or daughters of famous people in Hollywood and everything else. And people want to use that as a knock against them. But at the same time, okay, cool, you might use your family influence to get you in a position that a normal person might not. However, talent eventually weeds itself out. And if you're not good or the audience doesn't gravitate to you, it doesn't matter who your parents were. You got to be good at what you do. So give a little credit to, grinding through that. Same thing applies to home court advantage. How do you think home court advantage happens? Out of thin air? No, it's developed over time, and your coaches develop reputations. And why was Cameron Indoor such a difficult place to play? Because you were loud? It's loud at PNC Arena. It's loud at the Smith Center. It's not just because you were loud. There's also a Hall of Fame coach that you'd want to tick off, too, all right? And all the expectations of Duke and why people were there and everything else. Own the home court advantage, man, and also understand that things change a little bit when the guy's no longer there. I think that we're seeing that play out at Duke this year, are we not? What'd you say about that pandemic year when there was nobody at Cameron Indoor Stadium?
Well, that 10-point advantage went away pretty quickly.
Right, man. And it wasn't a knock.
Actually, I think it's like a 15-20 in the full K years.
Yeah.
I mean,
it wasn't, and it's not a knock. It's a credit to what's been built, man.
Again, human nature.
Yeah, human nature. It is what it is.